Hey, so before we jump in, let me ground us again. This is part of a series where we slow down and name what's actually shaping how we respond when things get uncomfortable. My name is Jesse Ross, and I work at the intersection of leadership, culture, community, and systems. And this isn't about labeling people, it's about building capacity. And capacity grows when we're honest. So I want to start here. Some of you, you've been trying, right? You've been reading books, you've attended workshops, you have spoken up in rooms that maybe have felt awkward, and yet nothing really shifts. And you leave meetings feeling like something was said, but not really addressed. You can sense the tension, but no one actually names it. And patterns, but they get dismissed as isolated, right? Isolated events. So that feeling, right, isn't confusion. That is what we call culture. And today, we're going to talk about two patterns that keep systems from changing, even when people are educated or aware. This is called individualism and the right to comfort. So let's start with individualism. It sounds fair. We're taught that people are responsible for themselves, that we should judge individuals, not groups, that we should focus on behaviors and not systems, or that what happens here, this is real life. But again, let me shift the context. Someone will raise a concern, right? It's like a hiring pattern, or how people get disciplined or reprimanded, right? Maybe it's about somebody's ideas actually getting moved forward. And usually the response from the group, from the culture, is that's just how they are. They didn't mean it. That was one bad call, but not consistently. So I need you to pause for a second. Have you ever watched the same issue show up maybe a little different in same ways though, over and over again, but it still gets treated like it's random? Yeah, that is what we call individualism, and that is how individualism works. It reduces the patterns, excuse me, it reduces the patterns of two personalities, not of personalities. It allows institutions to say, we dealt with that person, or we dealt with the issue, instead of asking, what in our system made that behavior normal? What have we created to make that type of behavior normal or consistent? So I like to get very practical about this thing. And if the same demographic group keeps leaving your organization, women, people of color usually, it's not a personality problem. It's not even a culture fit problem. If the same voice keeps getting labeled, they're too much or a lot, that's not an isolated tone issue. If the same feedback keeps surfacing over and over again and nothing in the structure actually changes, no, that's not coincidence. That is what we call culture, my friend. And here's the heart of it. Individualism feels safe because it keeps the problem small. And here's where it hits. It hits right in the gut. When someone brings up a systematic issue and it gets reduced to one situation, what they hear is you're overreacting, or you're misreading this, or you're all by yourself. This is an isolated event. And that is how people disengage. Not because they're dramatic, but because they are tired of naming the same patterns that keep getting individualized. The practical interruption, that's what we call it. If you want to interrupt individualism, instead of asking who messed up, you should ask what conditions made this possible. Instead of did that person mean it, or what was their intent, let's ask the question, why does this keep happening? I need you to shift the question from a person's character to the pattern of the offense. That's how leadership should be responding and should show up. So the second issue is the right to comfort, right? Now, this one is super subtle. It shows up being polite. It shows up as professionalism. It shows up in tone, and you've actually heard it. This feels intense. Can we calm down? Everybody take a breath. I agree with you, but not the same way. Let me be very clear about this. Discomfort is not harm. Discomfort is often at the beginning of awareness, actually. But in comfort-centered cultures, discomfort gets it gets treated like danger. And here's how that actually plays out in real life. So if somebody gives you direct feedback, maybe as they're talking, their voice is shaking. Maybe it comes out even harsher. It's not shaky at all, but it's super sharp. And instead of addressing the issue, the conversation pivots to, let's talk about delivery. Let's talk about how we perceive things. And now the person that's raising the issue is the actual problem. Pause for a second. Have you ever watched the tone of a conversation become more important than the actual truth of the convo? If so, that is comfort protecting itself. And the emotional costs look like this. People have to sometimes soften their truth in order to be heard. And when that happens, they eventually stop telling it. When people feel like they have to regulate themselves in the room consistently, they lean or they learn that the room isn't actually built for them. And when comfort sets the pace, it actually slows down growth. So if you want to interrupt the right to comfort, you have to learn how to separate discomfort from disrespect. You should be asking the question, is this hard to hear or is it harmful? I need you to normalize tension as a part of growth. We try to create containers where directness is allowed, feedback isn't put in a box, and accountability doesn't require emotional suppression. Safety is not the absence of discomfort. Safety is knowing that discomfort won't actually be weaponized. So as we think about these two systems, here's how we keep it stable, right? Individualism keeps the problem small. Comfort keeps the room calm. And together, they keep the system stable. Now, stable doesn't mean healthy. Stable actually means it's undisturbed. So here's the part that I need you to pay attention to. Some of you are frustrated because you feel like you're trying, and others of you are exhausted because you feel like you're explaining. And those two patterns create a gap. The gap isn't good or bad. The gap is just naturally inherited around habits. And so in order to move from awareness to capacity, we have to ask the question, so what do we do? And I hope that you're asking that question if you haven't. I need you to start small. So in the next meeting, I want you to notice where patterns get personalized. I want you to notice where tone replaces substance. I want you to notice who gets protected by comfort. And then gently shift the question. That's capacity. Capacity isn't about not being perfect. It's actually about staying in the conversation long enough for something to actually shift. The issue is sometimes we don't know what shifting should be or should look like. So if this conversation is landing for you and you're realizing that you want or need language for where you are or where your organization is, I have a cultural competency assessment that can be powerful as a starting point. It's, again, not a grade. It's not a mirror. It's not a grade. It is a mirror. And I usually work one-on-one with teams to help people identify where these patterns live and help them build shared language, move out of complacency, hopefully to grow some real capacity. And if you're actually ready for that kind of work, I'd appreciate it if you reached out. But I also don't want this to be performative. I want this to be something that is developmental. So as I close, I need you to understand that systems don't change because people get educated. Doesn't matter how many books you read or how many podcasts you listen to. Systems change because people build the emotional capacity to stay in the hard conversations without collapsing into what we would call defensiveness or retreating into comfort. If that's the kind of leader that you want to become, I appreciate it. I appreciate you listening, and I hope that you stay with this series because we're not done. Thank you for your time.